Welcome everyone. We're just kind of
Just give it a minute.
yeah, we're just gonna
There's
give people a couple minutes just to trickle in here. So most of you guys are coming in here with your audio muted and your video is also muted, so everyone can kind of like depending on your privacy and like what you want, you can keep that um, video off. And again, we're going to just try and keep everyone muted just so that we can have that space for the speakers to talk. And with the online format, any kind of like little noise or anything can be a bit of an issue. So just so you guys know. So we've got, looks like we're just over 50 people, and people are still kind of coming in, but we're a couple minutes past 2 o'clock. So I think what we'll do is we'll kind of just get started and go through the intro, and then as people come in, they come in. Just wanted to also mention that everything is recorded for the first hour, so the whole part where we're going to have the talk and so the Q&A portion. But again, this is something I will pass on to Ken, who's our moderator, and he'll kind of go through a couple of things with sort of like the etiquette and rules and like how to put your hand up so you can ask a question. So we'll get to that in a second. So I want to welcome all of you guys here and thank you all for coming here. Welcome to the 21st Vancouver Psychedelic App. We're very excited to have you guys here and to be part of this. This is a community and place for people to come together and have a chance to talk about things psychedelics and be introduced to new concepts and ideas and talk about a whole bunch of things even related to that, like even the philosophy and consciousness and like altered states, and even a place for people to share their experiences and be part of this community. So it's a really special place, and I'm really thrilled to have you guys be here and be part of this. I wanted to introduce myself. I am Christoph. I'm the founder of the Vancouver Psychedelics meetup. And again, I'm just so happy to have you guys here. Just to give you guys a little bit of an idea of the format for today. So once we're just done with the intro, we're going to have our guest speaker, who we'll introduce shortly. And we're also going to have Ken is our moderator and one of the group leaders and community organizers. He's going to just go through some of the ground rules and the sort of the etiquette, basically, for asking questions and a few things like that. Then we're going to, after our speaker gives his talk, he's going to have we're going to have about a half-hour period for questions and answers. So there'll be a chance for you guys to kind of connect and go more deep and really ask those burning questions. So it's a really great part of all this. Afterwards, we're going to have a brief intermission just for a couple minutes, and then we have the last hour, which is the portion where we break into smaller groups of 6. So we try and break it so that we have our group leaders, at least one group leader in each of the groups, to sort of help with the discussions. But it's a chance for people to really come together and talk in a smaller, more intimate setting where you can actually get to know the people around you and some of the people in the community. And it's something I, again, really do recommend you guys stick around for that last hour as well, because it's really a chance to just sort of share your experiences and actually interact, not just be on the receiving end of information. So it's a really special part of all of this. So definitely stick around for that. And then with that, I also wanted to just give a shout out. We just finished we did a psychedelic calendar. So there's a number of us that were part of that. And I wanted to give a shout out to Anna, who helped put a lot of this together and sort of took the leadership and creative design on this. And a thank you to her, as well as everyone else who participated in this. I'll get maybe Anna to share the link. And then if anyone is interested in getting one of the calendars, we definitely do offer that. It's very cool. Definitely want to take a look at it. We'll post that in there as well. And with that, we also have a book club. So if anyone's interested, we'll post some details for that a little bit later. But we'll just look out for that in the chat. So with that, I wanted to pass it on to Ken, and then Ken's just gonna give us a couple of things with regards to the etiquette and rules and the next meetup.
etiquette and rules sounds so strict.
Well, it's better than the ground rules, I think. Maybe we'll have to...
Yes, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. And just a couple quick things to go over. this, as we mentioned, we are recording. And so there are a few options for your privacy. You can change your name. In Zoom, there are different controls available on the computer or the phone that allow you to change your name. So you can put in your first name, remove your last, or just put in something fake. You can also disable your video. In general, usually if we ever do decide to share this one day, we will, we would kind of crop out the names or whatever of who's there. But, if you want to disable your video, make sure your face is not shown, you can definitely do that. And then, we'll do as much as we can, but our privacy cannot be guaranteed. We're kind of doing best effort at this point. We haven't actually shared any of these just yet. We at one point we're considering it, but just FYI, those are the things you can do. Yeah, just want to ask again, the default is to have everyone muted when you join. So thank you for keeping your fingers off the button when it's not time. But yeah, when we, while we're there, there'll be some points to ask questions. And so familiarize yourself with the raising hand button. So when we're asking for questions, if you want to get in line, you can raise your hand. And then lastly, if you want to ask questions in the chat, you certainly can. If you don't feel comfortable asking it out loud or you don't want to go on video or whatever, you can just ask in the chat and I will kind of queue them up as well. But try to be super clear in the chat, just so they're nice and clear and there's a thing back and forth. Also, if you have any problems with your Wi-Fi or anything, there is a dial-in option. You can dial in via phone. If you have any problems with audio or whatever, or a bad Wi-Fi connection, you just can go down to the audio button there where it says mute and leave the computer audio and then rejoin the phone. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We will, like as mentioned, we'll take a quick break between the main session and the breakout sessions. And the last thing I want to mention is we do have our next event already planned. We have a pretty well-known author, Eric Davis. He's author of a few pretty popular books on psychedelics and all things weird. And we'll be posting that event in the next week or two. But definitely looking forward to that one. He's a pretty well-known guy. So very, very excited to have him with us. So that's all. I'll just hand it back to Christoph to get the party started here.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so thanks for that, Ken. So with that, I want to introduce our guest for today. So we're excited to have Andrew Feldmar on. He's a Hungarian psychotherapist. He's an expert in the field, and he's been doing psychotherapy for over 48 years. He's got a very large sort of set of kind of skills on this, and he's going to be talking about a type of radical psychotherapy is something that he's helped popularize, and we're very much looking forward to the talk he's going to give us. And I want to thank you, Andrew, for coming on and doing this for us, and we're very excited to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me. So, floor is mine.
It's all yours.
I was laughing when you were saying that I don't know what the word you used, that I'm popularizing radical psychotherapy. I don't think it ever will be popular. So since I'm going to talk about actually psychedelics and psychotherapy, I'll tell you why I changed my mind about entheogens in the title and used the wider term psychedelic. But about radical therapy, my experience, my major experience with psychedelics is within the scope of psychotherapy. So I'm coming with about 50 years of experience, way before the present popularization and acceptance of psychedelics by psychiatry and psychotherapy in general. And because of the present wave of this renaissance, I'm a bit worried that a lot of things will be forgotten about what really psychedelics are good for, what their magic really is. Because if it's going to be medicalized, then we are going down the wrong path. So in order to clarify why this whole thing cannot happen under the medical model, or it would be a categorical mistake, I want to go back about more than 2,000 years, even to Aristotle, who very clearly distinguished three kinds of sciences. He talked about the theoretical sciences, such as physics, mathematics. He talked about the productive sciences, and he gave two examples, medicine and architecture. And of course, what's common is that there are blueprints. You know how things should be. If I have a broken arm, I definitely want to go to a doctor who is a productive scientist, because I want my bones to heal precisely according to blueprint, how they should be. And then Aristotle named a third bunch of sciences, which he called practical sciences. And he gave two examples, ethics and politics, which cannot possibly be theoretical and cannot possibly have any blueprint, because you have to do it by the seat of your pants time and time and time again, and you cannot generalize because it's situational, because two situations don't occur ever which are the same. So the moment, no, radical psychotherapy recognizes that. In fact, the greatest cause of unhappiness, I think, is powerlessness. It has nothing to do with psychology. It has nothing to do with the brain. It has nothing to do with biochemistry. It has to do with politics. So 90% of the work I do as a radical psychotherapist, and radical is radix, roots, back to the roots. It's just, that's all it means. I think my practice would be pretty well the same 2,000 years ago as it is now. In psychotherapy, there has been no advancement. Technology advances, but the soul and the spirit doesn't. It's always the same. People were unhappy before Christ for the same reasons as people are unhappy today. So most of my work is really politics and ethics. Ethics is how we treat each other. That's all, very simple. And I don't think people suffer because there is something wrong with them. I think people suffer because of how we treat each other. That is, what I pay attention to is what's between. R.D. Laing, who was my teacher, called himself an interpersonal social phenomenologist. Interpersonal because the trouble is not in you, not in me. The trouble is always between people. Now, it may be very hard to pay attention to what's between people. Nevertheless, that's what we have to do. Phenomenology, because phenomenology pays attention and tries to find words for what is the case. So phenomenology concerns itself with describing and depicting what goes on between people accurately. For example, a lot of people talk about this happened and that happened and then that happened. And if you really think about it, nothing ever happens. It's a mystification. And most of us go crazy or suffer because we allow people around us to talk in mystifying terms because we try to avoid the obvious, which is who did what to whom. And that's praxis. Sartre already was onto it, and Laing worked with Sartre on this particular issue, how to demystify, how to go from process, which is all sorts of things are happening and nobody knows what's going on, but it's happening. An earthquake may be happening, but a divorce never happens. It's somebody doing something to somebody. And once between us, we find the correct words, and we describe and depict accurately who does what to whom, things shift. Not necessarily expose themselves. Actually, the true meaning of diagnosis, dia is through, gnosis is to know. So it's to see through what appears to what is. That's a diagnosis. So phenomenology diagnoses what's going on, then things shift, then it has to be diagnosed again. And if we do it accurately, it will shift. And that process of inquiry, simple inquiry, joint inquiry, is what I call psychotherapy. Nothing else. No medical stuff, no labeling. The moment you label, the moment you say you're one of those, you're depressed, you're a manic depressive, you are bipolar, you are schizophrenic. I don't even see you anymore. You're out of focus. You're not an individual. The moment we say you're one of those, I just see a blur. And most people who work with people see a blur because they don't want to see sharply. The fact that I can blur people by labeling them might give me some security that I don't have to get involved. Whereas in what I call radical therapy, there is nothing else. I simply participate in a relationship. I keep company, I pay attention, what appears to be the case is that if you're lost in the woods on your own, you get so scared that you might go around in circles, you may not find your way out. But if I find my way to you and simply keep you company, you're going to be less afraid. You might actually recognize certain markers and actually find your way out. I don't have to lead you out. I don't know where you are. I don't know. I just find you, keep you company. And just because you're not freaking out being alone, you might actually be less anxious. You are able to pay more attention and discover what it is you really want to be doing. And I have no plan for you. I have no blueprint. I have no idea. You're so infinitely other that I couldn't possibly know anything about you. It's the patient's job to teach the therapist about who they are and even the categories through which they experience their lives. I've said this elsewhere, but okay, so I've been working with people for about 50 years. After about 25 years, I realized that I don't understand anybody. And fortunately, I realized that I don't have to understand anybody. That's not the important part. In fact, if I try to understand the people who come to see me, I would probably colonize them, because I could only understand you according to the categories in my own mind. So actually, I would probably try to fit a square U into my round holes, which is colonization. When the first Europeans went to China or India, the letters that they wrote back home only revealed their own minds. They had absolutely no idea. They couldn't possibly know anything about the Chinese or the Indian. It took decades of living there, of intermarrying, of actually being there with others before it even dawned on Europeans how the Chinese or the Indians experienced the world, experienced themselves. So I have given up on that. Now, fortunately, one can love somebody without understanding them. If that couldn't be done, we'd be in trouble. Now, a little bit about psychedelics. The first experience I had was shortly after I went into psychology, arrived at the University of Western Ontario, having been working on my PhD in pure mathematics. I got my honors BA in math, physics, and chemistry at University of Toronto, went down to Johns Hopkins to study mathematics for my PhD, and then changed my mind and got interested in psychology. So there was a man employed by the psych department and the computer department whose background was also mathematical, who hired me to do some programming for him and offered that I could get an MA in psychology in 2 years. So I took him up on it. And then, by the way, one day he said, you know, I'm from Saskatchewan, where it was the first laboratories where people experimented with LSD in Canada, with Duncan Blewett as the head of the psych department at the University of Saskatchewan in Regina. So he was from there, and he said he participated in those first experiments, but he has had enough and he wants to pass on the task to a younger generation, and I was it. And would I like to try the last bit of Sandoz LSD that he brought himself from Saskatchewan? Now, there have been a few moments in my life where I said yes to such proposals, clearly knowing I had no idea what I'm saying yes to. In 1956, after the Hungarian Revolution, which the Russians put down by end of October, between Christmas and New Year's of 56, my father said, would you like to have a Western education? Now, that was the same kind of question as, would you like to take LSD? I had no idea what my father was. Like, how could I know what that question means? How can anyone know who has not taken LSD what he's saying yes to when he says, yes, I will do that? So that, for example, brings into great question the whole idea of consent. If we are going to play psychiatry, if we are going to play medicine, if we are going to play psychology with it, then we should have informed consent. Well, I claim nobody can give informed consent to taking a psychedelic who hasn't taken it before. because the experience is of an order that cannot be imagined, even if you read about it, even if you heard about it. The actual experience is of a different category. I think I said yes to both because it was the kind of consent that one gives when somebody says, do you want to climb a mountain with me? It's consent to have an adventure. That's all. So it's not scientific. It's not, I have a friend, a philosopher friend, Alfonso Lingus, and in one of his essays, he talks about a South American psychotherapist who had a difficult patient, and he thought the consulting room was too small for them. And he had the bright idea of inviting him to climb one of the tallest mountains in South America. That they would take 10 days and have this adventure, go to the top of this mountain. The therapist tried it a few years before and failed, and he wanted to try again. And the patient said yes. So for 10 days, they were up on the mountain. They failed. They couldn't get to the top. Inclement weather. They had to go back to base station. But they sure had an experience together. Their relationship certainly changed. Well, any therapist who has LSD with his or her patient, the relationship will change for sure. So I just think it has to be very clear that consent cannot mean anything more. They almost died on the mountain, on the slope of the mountain, but they were together. What could the therapist promise the patient? Nothing. All he could promise that he'll be there. He'll do his damnedest to survive. And but it's a dangerous undertaking. They almost froze to death. They could have broken a leg. There is no way to take LSD with someone without dangers. I have had many experiences. No two were the same. No one knows the territory, even if one can be familiar in it. Every time a door could open up, which contains unknown adventures, positive and negative. So now I'll switch a little bit to the main topic. I mean, this is a topic we could talk for weeks. So I'm just really making one or 2 points. So I don't think that the magic is in the substance, which I think these days, the way it's legalized now, the way Health Canada is looking at it, the way MAPS is promoting it, it's like any drug. It's a good drug. Well, I don't think the drug is the magic. I'll tell you what I think the magic is. The magic is that these substances make the person lose control. That's the magic. And when you're in the company of someone who you trust, trauma work, by the way, Judith Lewis Herman, I think, wrote the best book on trauma and recovery. She's an American psychiatrist, and she mapped out what she thinks the stages are, healing from any kind of trauma. The first one, she said, was establishing some measure of safety, security, and trust between the therapist and the patient. Now, she says that could take a couple of days, or it could take 10 years. It takes as long as it takes. It cannot be rushed, because if there is pressure on the patient, then the patient will comply. And it won't be authentic and it won't be genuine. So it takes as long as it takes. Now, I think the healing moment is between people, is when I give up my defenses and actually I'm in a position vis-a-vis you where you could kill me and I couldn't take care of myself. Because if I can protect myself, and that's why you can't kill me or hurt me, and it's more of the same, nothing new, no new experience. But if somehow I get into a position where I know you could kill me or hurt me, and you don't, well, now that may be a new experience for many people. Because up until that point, whenever anyone could hurt them or take advantage of them or kill them, they did. So most of us think we are here because we are so clever. Most of us think we are here because heroically we have protected ourselves, we have worked hard. The major horse for many of us that got us here is the will. I want this, I'll get this, this is what I want to do, this is how I want to do it. And it works. It works very well. However, there are many experiences which, if you are willful, you will never have. So the opposite to willful is willing. There was an old psychoanalyst in London who I met shortly before she died. Her name was Marion Milner. She wrote many books. In most of them, either here or there, she mentions this sentence comes up. The only proper function of the will is to will, not to will. She says, imagine the will as a snake and make it bite its own tail. Now, if you know anything about what can happen in a psychedelic trip, the moment the person who is losing control says, stop it, I want to get out, this is too much, I don't want this, I made a mistake, get me out of here. Usually, the guide, the sitter, would say something like, just relax, go with it. Don't will anything. The more you want to get out, the worse it will get. Surrender to it, go with it. It's like a dream, just go with it. Actually, what we say is will, not to will. Like Christians say, thy will be done, not mine. If we were Christian, we could say, you're in the everlasting hand of God. What are you tensing your muscles for? Just relax. Let the universe do with you as it will. It's doing it anyways. So I think the major marvel of psychedelics, if you stick with it long enough, is that you actually realize that you're not alive by your own cleverness, but that something lives you. You don't know how to liver your liver. You don't know how to beat your heart. You don't know how to put yourself together in your mother's womb. You know, just like an apple tree apples, the universe peoples. Every martial art basically teaches you to get out of the way, to will nothing, to let the life that lives you, the chi, let the life that lives you protect you. Let that move you. Relax into that which lives you. Get out of the way. Your will is just making things terrible. Now, the organ of the will is the musculature. because actually, if I want to move this from here to here, that's proper. You can use the will for those things which can be willed. But I want you to like me. I can't use my muscles for that. That just generates anxiety. Willing things which cannot be willed generate anxiety. Most of us suffer from the hatred of reality. We want things differently than they are. Anxiety. It's not a medical condition. It's not a brain disease. It comes from doing certain things that cannot really be done. So maybe just one or two more ideas, just so again, you know, like when I talk about, no, so entheogens I didn't want to use because already there is an intention in using the word. It's like taking a psychedelic in order to meet God, in order to have a unitive experience, in order to have a religious experience. I say let it creep up on you. Don't will it. The more you will it, the more it will elude you. The will doesn't work. So if it happens, great. You know, it's like trying to, I want an erection. Well, the more a man wants an erection, the more anxious he's going to get. But if God, the universe, wanted you to be in control of your cock, it would have made it out of muscle. It's not made out of muscle. So you want to will something that cannot be willed, and you're off track. Now, say you take a large dose of ketamine. One of the first things, when I had my first ketamine experience, I couldn't move. So my will was knocked out by the ketamine. The organ of my will, and I had paranoid thoughts. I thought the person who injected me with it is wants to hurt me. So paranoia came before metanoia, and metanoia was the Greek word for a change of heart, a change of mind, a breaking through. But from normal to metanoia, we have to pass through paranoia. It's just hopefully we won't get stuck there. Now, the processes that I have been experiencing, LSD, for example, helping people, is a woman I spoke about before who came out of the backwards of Riverview to see me. A psychologist brought her, and for a long time, she never said a word. She was terribly depressed, in despair, I would say. Altogether, I saw her for about 7 years, and I had about 800 psychotherapy sessions with her. Of that, about 10 years ago, she had 3 fairly consecutive, maybe 2 weeks apart, large dose LSD experiences. Nothing seemed to have. She attempted suicide a whole bunch of times before. The first time, nothing much happened. The second time, nothing much happened. The third time, a transformative experience occurred. She went through some very huge changes. And from then on, she has never been depressed so far. I get an email from her once a year, basically saying that she loves me and hates me. And she wishes herself happy birthday, which was the day of the last LSD session, the 3rd. By the way, the reason she went for 3 is because she read Stanislav Grof's notion that if you come out of a trip not feeling very well, then it's like you have to spin the roulette wheel. Maybe the second time it'll come out in the positive matrix. And second time it didn't. She basically said she'll try one more time, and after that she'll off herself. Well, fortunately, the 3rd time it came out in a very lasting positive space. So hopefully that gives you a taste of how I think about psychedelics and psychotherapy. So now we can talk about what interests you, and you can ask questions. And if I can, I'll talk with you about it.
Thank you, Andrew, for going through that. That was very insightful, and I think we've already had quite a few questions come up in the chat. So maybe I'll just hand it over to Kenny, and then he'll kind of relay those questions to you.
Yeah. Hey, so again, for anyone that wants to ask a question directly, you can over audio or turn on your camera. You can speak directly with Andrew. I got 2 questions so far that I will ask if I don't get anyone to raise their hand right away. But again, if you can hit the raise hand button, or if you can't figure it out, just pop the chat to me, and I'll unmute your mic and get you up front to ask any questions. But while we wait for anyone to go ahead and do that, I will start off with Jeremy's question. It was partially answered by Soma in the chat room already, but I wanted to give Andrew a chance to respond there. And Soma, if it makes sense to unmute her to help answer, I certainly will, Andrew, if you would like. Looks like that's your daughter. But yeah, so the question from Jeremy was, aren't diagnostic labels important in making an efficient use of the client's time in finding an understanding about what is happening in their experience?
I wish, but efficiency is, love is not efficient, okay? So under the name of efficiency, which is the disease of capitalism and technological society, we want to be efficient. It doesn't work. An efficient mother is not a good mother. The way that you tell somebody that you love them is you hang out with them, is you linger. Lingering is not efficient. Efficiency, impatience hurts. In surgery or bone setting, as I said, I'd like to have an efficient doctor. But when I am trying to understand my relationship with humans, my relationship with the universe, and understand how to not bring my past hurts into the present moment, how not to allow my traumas to ruin my present and future. If somebody wants to be efficient with me, they are going to hurt me more, not help me. That's why R.D. Laing said that when people said that he's an anti-psychiatrist, he laughed and he said, no, he is a true psychiatrist. The rest of them are anti-psychiatrists, because the Hippocratic Oath is do no harm. And he said, psychiatry obviously harms people who seek help from them. And to do no harm is much harder than efficiency. So I think, I hope and pray I never get into the hands of someone who wants to do psychedelic psychotherapy with me efficiently.
All right, got a hand up here from Vanna. Go right ahead.
Yep. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared. I really appreciate how you expanded on labels. I actually find that labels can, if we attach ourselves too strongly to our labels, we also can prevent ourselves from healing, because our identity is tied to that. But the question I had was, you said something about intentions and not necessarily setting intentions. And I was wondering what your take on intentions role before a trip is, because that's something that we hear about a lot. Set your intentions before you go on a psychedelic journey.
Yeah. But, I have to repeat that it's our attachment to willfulness. It's scary to go into the unknown. So we pretend we can control it. And those who come in as experts, who we have transference towards, then they encourage us to do something that reduces their anxiety. All I can say is to go into a psychedelic trip with intention is cheeky. It's like how can the part know what's good for the whole that I'm a part of? You know, like it's Laing said to actually pray, if you're religious, if you pray for something, then it's cheeky, like because your will, like who are you to know what would be good for you? To give you an example, that we are like, and the Catholics use these metaphors. I'm not religious and I'm definitely not Catholic, but some of the metaphors have to be religious in order to understand. Like if humanity is an organism, then it's like we are cells, tiny cells. You are one, I am one, in some larger organism that we can't even conceive of. Like the cells in my hand, they don't know who Andrew is, but they serve me. It's my will that moves them. Now, you know, if here they are having a little psychedelic trip, these little individuals, my cells, wouldn't I be laughing if they had an intention? Like, what would that be? Their intention will never affect me, whereas my intention will affect them. And the good cell, a cell that I will surrender to what is larger than itself. Cancer cells in me are the selfish cells who cut off communication, who don't serve me anymore. So people who are cut off because of their own willfulness, it's very dangerous for them, and it's very dangerous for the larger organism, whether it's humanity, whether it's the universe. I don't know precisely what we are small parts of, but for sure I know that if the apple is smart, it's only smart because of the apple tree. Where did it get its smartness? So any intelligence I have comes from the universe. So to go into an LSD trip, both as a therapist and as a patient, the best thing is that both of us surrender to the larger thing that we are a part of and let whatever needs to happen for all our benefit that we can't even conceive of. So the only way to go in would be surrender. Now, I'll give you one more example because it's very important. In Lourdes, in France, there is a sacred place called Lourdes where people from all over the world go into the waters. They are sacred waters, and some people get healed. They go in, they come out, they can throw their crutches away, they see when they were blind. There was a physician who set up a booth beside the waters, and he examined people before they went in, and he examined people after they came out. And he did find genuine, miraculous healings. And he asked 100 questions from each, and then did a factor analysis of what would predict that a person would get healed and another person wouldn't. He found only one commonality, which was the quality of the prayer with which they went into the waters. He said, when you went in with an intention, please let me walk again, please, I want to see again, nothing happened. No healing occurred. No one who went in with an intention ever got healed. Those people got healed who were so overwhelmed by the sacredness of the situation that they basically, one of the most common Christian prayers is, let thy will be done, not mine, who basically surrendered and said, you know, what the hell, do with me as you wish. You're doing with me anyways. So total surrender at the occasion of this sacred place, those were the people who got miraculously healed. So as far as I'm concerned, to go into a trip with an intention is deeply mistaken.
So my question is there any known cases when both LSD and MDMA were involved in a therapy session? And if you don't know about it, what would you think would be in such a therapy?
Well, if it comes to that, the major effect of MDMA is it presents you. It allows you to exist without shame, maybe for the first time in your life, because you don't know how much you're in shame until it stops, and then you realize you've been in it always. So no shame, you're present, and it opens your heart. And again, you don't know how closed your heart has been until it opens more. So it was originally designed by Shulgin and recommended to be used in psychotherapy to shorten that period of time of establishing some measure of safety, security, and trust. Because if your heart opens and you're not ashamed and you're present, then maybe you see the other, your therapist, you see the other who is with you for who that person is. Now, that means that that person really has to be guileless, because if in that open state, you see that the person you're doing it with, your therapist or your friend, is evil or dishonest or has in any way malicious, then you freak out. So that's why it's very important that when you're in that state, you see the true loving nature of the person who you are with. And I would say the basic definition of love, I'm not being sentimental here, is basically, if you love somebody, then you make a decision that you could hurt them and you won't. Because if you said, oh, I couldn't hurt you, you're lying. Because of course, everybody could hurt you. But love is, I'll protect you from the worst in me. Now, if the other who is with you is already in that state, then it's safe for you to take MDMA in that person's presence. Now, if you're going to take LSD and mix it with MDMA, there are two places that you could most likely even think of doing it. Either in the beginning, so you start with MDMA and then take the LSD, because then you establish some trust, and then you can go deeply into psyche or spirit, wherever the LSD will take you. Or you do the LSD trip, and as you're coming down, near the end, you take some MDMA to land not so roughly. It could smooth your landing back into ordinary reality. But you know, that's that may be different for different people. But from my experience, those are the two possibilities.
I had another question that I was going to ask you, but I got to come back to the no intention. Your comments about no intentions. I find it fascinating. And the reason is, I worked with Gabor Mate for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And it was all about setting intention.
Yes, yes.
And, sorry, go ahead.
No, I know. Like he represents, you know, if I'm Christ, he's the Antichrist. And,
I know your history. It's great.
Christ, then I am the Antichrist.
Yeah. But my question is, so what you're doing is you're challenging my long-held belief on how to work with medicine.
I hope so.
Yeah, which is wonderful. I'm super excited.
Good.
My question is, it's also deep personal experience, long time. My question is, I'm interested in the distinction between when you go in with an intention, like your Lourdes example, it's like I can go into that session being in my head. And that's kind of your caution about having no intention is, now I'm in my head. I'm not surrendering to the total experience. And yet, I find medicine work is really guidable, whether it's ayahuasca or...
Who the hell wants to guide it? Of course it's guidable. But whose intelligence will guide it when you are up against a superior intelligence? Like, don't you see why I say it's cheeky?
I've witnessed a lot of people that go into medicine and it's so overwhelming. They're all over the place.
Right.
Now, how about if they want to work on, like if they want to...
It's their problem. I don't want to work on anything. I want to play with things. I want to experience. I don't want to work. Again, like you're stuck in the medical model where there's a blueprint.
That was going to be my first question, actually, was
there is no blueprint.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I want the guy who sets my broken bone to work on it. Because there's a goal.
Yeah.
If I were tripping with you, there would be no goal. Any goal would be an egoic goal. I mean, we can waste time with, you know, like going to Calgary or going to Toronto, but we'll never get to heaven.
I'm still curious. So how does that person, that woman that came to see you all that time, she went on her third LSD experience, she had this huge, big, beautiful breakthrough and has never felt depressed since. What happened?
God knows. She didn't know. Usually what happens is, like, you know, talk about another fashionable term is integration. Like, yeah. You think I worked on integrating her experience? Like, that would be an insult to her. I was just present. She never talked about it, most likely because it couldn't be talked about. Because most likely, if she actually died, if she actually got crucified in the experience, or her ego, because she didn't die physically, but if she experienced the Eleusinian mystery, if by chance she experienced it, and she was nowhere, and then she experienced herself trickling back into life, resurrected, if she experienced herself resurrected, then the conclusion would be, and she may not find the words for it, I had trouble finding the words for it. The healing in that particular experience is that it wasn't by her effort, because she wasn't there. So it was a total surprise. She experienced that she died. And then, without any will, just by the grace of the universe, she trickled back into life. Resurrection is the healing moment, because it's not happening because you want it. And it didn't happen because I wanted it. Nobody wanted it. The universe performed a miracle. And that's what kept her happy to the present day, I think. But we never talked about it. I'll talk about it, but if she won't initiate talking about it, I sure won't.
Well, thank you. It's a novel perspective. You know, I built my experience on both intention setting and integration afterwards.
Right.
And so to hear you challenge that is beautiful.
Good. Well, you can try it and see what happens. Now, the other thing is, the way I suggested, like going in without intention, it's not efficient, and the operator doesn't feel like a hero.
The practitioner, the shaman,
the practitioner doesn't feel like a hero. because the practitioner undergoes and goes into the unknown as well as the patient. Nobody knows, nobody controls. There is no control. So the miracle happens to the practitioner as well as the one who is wanting something out of it. So when you're surrendering, then there is no heroic. So the way I do it is a feminine model, like a midwife. Midwives don't do what obstetricians do. You know, Gabor Mate is an MD. He's a medical doctor. So he's a hero. I'm a lowly midwife.
Okay, I'll leave. Actually, I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'll leave it. I'm really conscious of the time. There's a lot of people that want to talk to you, but you know, if you look at ayahuasca, the Shipibo indigenous approach,
yeah,
they're working with the energy.
That's what they say.
Yeah, well, they're very clear. This is, I'm doing work on you. I'm taking this bad energy and I'm working with it.
Yeah. Well, part of radical therapy, I come from a long tradition of skepticism, not cynicism, skepticism. And skeptics from ancient Greek times on, their favorite question is, are you sure? And they thought the dogmatics suffered and the skeptics were the healers. And the skeptics just asked very kindly, very gently, the dogmatics, are you sure? One of the first questions that R.D. Laing asked me after we talked about our psychedelic experiences is, he said, yeah, you had that experience and I had my experiences. I absolutely, totally trust and believe you that you experienced what you experienced. And I'm sure you trust me that what I told you, I experienced. And let me ask you, what does it mean? And it's extremely important to realize no human being, I think, who is alive today actually can answer that question. We have no idea what those experiences mean. For me, pragmatically, I don't care what it means. It works, it makes big changes in people, enormous changes, something is going on, but whether it's metaphorical, and metaphors can heal, or whether it's actual, an insight into the larger, the truth about the larger universe, I have no idea.
Fair enough. Well, thank you very much. I do agree with one thing, and that is to be held in loving kindness by whatever the model is. That's the most important part right there.
I agree.
Okay. Peter, thank you. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Moving on, Paul, you have the floor.
Okay. Hi, Andrew.
Hi.
Thanks for the talk. And let me get you in my screen. There you go. I can see you. Okay. Wow. So that was all very interesting. Okay. So I have actually two questions, if you don't mind. The first one, I was excited about the story you talked about, the adventure of the psychotherapist who took somebody to Peru. I'm an avid traveler and I've taken travel as part of my own healing practice. And the qualities of it that I found are essentially psychedelic are, as you emphasize, going into the unknown. Generally, I find myself very naturally, very assisted in being in the present moment. And I'm always, I have no idea what's going on. I like to go into other cultures. I always thought that would be a very powerful way to conduct a psychotherapy session. So you're the first person I've heard ever say that somebody ever did it. Is there more? Is there a bigger context of people doing therapy in that type of way?
You want a movement?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Why not?
No, I only know of this one particular case, and it's second-hand knowledge, not third, second-hand. I haven't talked to the therapist or the patient, but the therapist talked to my friend who is the philosopher.
I see. Okay. Well, I always thought that that would be. I find it to be a very natural flow state to go into. So,
Yeah.
okay.
I like the idea very much.
Yeah. At least as if people are stable enough to be able to function, then that would be good. Okay. So my second question is, which I think I already got the answer with you talking with Tony. There can be, broadly speaking, and I'm reticent to sound like I'm trying to be efficient in my descriptions with you. But in taking psychedelics, or even in meditative experience, or just long-term contemplative inquiry, there can be those confrontation experiences where you feel like you're about to die, where you're being pushed into like an oven or something like that, about to be baked alive or whatever. And then there's mystical experiences where the ego just shuts down and there's complete silence and kind of a wordless, truly wordless transcendence. The LSD experience with the girl you talked about sounded like the first one I was talking about. I was wondering if you have thoughts about any qualitative differences that you find in the healing session when either of those two happen, because I know in the studies on psilocybin, they say if people have a mystical experience, which is more the non-egoic, which is kind of more what you're talking about, experience, that there's 80% chance of healing depression. I don't know. Have you noticed that there's better outcomes when there's a mystical experience versus a confrontation type experience, or do you see those as the same experiences?
I don't know. Again, I think it's on the way from normal state of consciousness to metanoia. We all go through paranoia. And I think these questions are paranoid questions. I think science is the best transformation of paranoia. Because when you're paranoid, you want to understand. Yeah. The license plates are talking to you. And there may be a connection. And is there a difference? And so on. And of course, after paranoia, after that kind of experience, when one gets tired of all the is this that, is that this, comes a depression, but it's not really this depression, it's just realizing the uselessness of trying to know, which fills one with despair at first, because it feels like if that's not taking us anywhere, then it's as if the whole enterprise is hopeless. But then it isn't. So there's paranoia, there is depression, and when there is metanoia, then you don't have to, even if I could answer your question, is it the same or is it not? Maybe some people go through one, some people go through the other. It's not necessarily that that number, that people who go through that with a 60% chance end up depressed, I don't believe.
Well, I know I said they cure their depression. 80% cure their depression if they have a mystical experience.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Well, I think depending on who is with you and what that person's beliefs are, that's what is going to happen to you, a function of, not what we are talking about. So I think the most important thing is the mindset of the therapist as well as the mindset of the patient. And it can have one outcome or another outcome. It's really interactional, partly because I also often point this out. If this is the patient and this is the therapist, at first it looks like we are separate. But if we both go in, and by the way, of course, most people don't both go in, which I think has a deleterious effect on what can happen on psychedelics. If you go in and I observe you, that's already shame-inducing and divisive. So I think what I am talking about is both people go in. to the same state of consciousness. So we are partaking. It would be like one person climbs the mountain and the other watches. Wouldn't work. It's not a joint experience. So as we go into an altered state and we are here, we will know everything about each other. Like this will be more intimate than the most intimate sexual relationship. So there's nothing to hide. The therapist can't hide anything, not his beliefs, not his dogmas, not his fears, nothing. So what happens here is what Johns Hopkins doesn't measure.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Excellent. Moving right along. Evan, you're up next.
Hi, yeah, thank you for your time. I've always taken a pretty open and like experiential approach to psychedelics, so I naturally tended to gravitate towards the free-based DMT experience, where it just kind of takes you wherever and you don't really have much chance of setting intentions to begin with. I was just curious if you have any thoughts on that experience as a whole, or if it has much therapeutic benefit compared to like LSD and things.
Well, who knows? You probably could tell me more than I could tell you. There are certain altered states of consciousness that are very interesting, but they don't make a difference in certain ways, it seems. Like, for example, sexual orgasm is an altered state of consciousness. It can be, but it's too short for most people. Even if it's multiple, it's too short to study it or to hang out in it or to really get to know it or to be transformative, although it can be. The DMT experience for me is so intense that it may be opening certain experiences that I can simple-mindedly, I have my body. If I look through my body, I have my psyche experience. And if I look through my experience, there is the spirit. The experience you're talking about just goes through what the psyche. It doesn't do anything about the psyche. So it's great. It's very interesting. But if there are sticking points, traumas in your life, I don't think even a lot of DMT experiences, they're not going to make any difference to your psyche. You know, just like,
No, I think,
I just give you one example. People who have meditated for decades, most systems of meditation, Zen, Vipassana, the people who, the Roshis and the gurus and so on, they're not interested in the content of your experience. They're not interested in your psyche. So what happens is, for example, shame is not addressed in meditation. So psychotherapy, where you at least there is another human being that you expose yourself to, psychotherapy seems to be the only human enterprise on earth now where people can work on their shame. So I'm just saying that because, I mean, I don't have extensive experience with pure DMT, but the experience I have, it's way beyond shame and honor, and it doesn't touch.
You're right, yeah. No, I think you make a very good point with it, and I don't really think of it as a very therapeutic application compared to like ayahuasca or something anyway.
Right.
Although there is something to be said with like things like changa, which is like a blend that is smoked, which is also an MAOI too. But yeah, thank you. I was just curious on what your thoughts were.
Okay.
Excellent. Up next, we have Andres.
Thanks, Kenny. And thank you, Andrew, very much for giving the talk. I was just I mean, I'll just comment firsthand. I've never seen so many Hungarians in one of these online talks. So köszönöm nagyon szépen, hogy adod ezt a beszédet.
Nagyon szíves.
Yeah, I was telling Christoph, hopefully we could have done the whole thing in Hungarian, but maybe another time. So my question to you, and this was somewhat addressed in your response to Tony, but I find this concept that you were getting at in terms of the tension of non-doing and doing, and that kind of seeming paradox between them, and how that can be potentially reconciled with psychedelics or with the therapy that you're suggesting. So I'm hoping you can speak to that a little bit, just because I mean most psychonauts, myself included, when we're going into these trips, you know, we think that we're kind of actively going into it and we're improving ourselves, and we take a very active position or orientation towards it. And so I guess, yeah, what are your thoughts around kind of that orientation?
Very fashionable to do that. You know, astronaut, heroic. You know, that men want to be heroic. I don't know why, but I have a feminine streak. What can I say? Instead of you're just gonna be there and you won't do anything, I rather you're gonna do things but you won't be there. Like to me, being is far more interesting than doing. Again, because doing is all muscular, it's all will. And whatever we are talking about that is healing, I think has zero to do with the will. I think all our suffering is due to willfulness, other people's and our own. So I think there has to come a moment where we risk, and it's an enormous risk. It's terrifying. That's why most people, if they go in just, so the effectiveness of psychedelics, but also I prefer to go in with whatever psychedelic I'm using with a large dose rather than with small doses, because if you go in with a large dose, your usual defenses of controlling would be knocked out, especially the first time when your clever psyche doesn't even know where you're going to lose control. You come in with a low dose, being careful and tiptoeing, and your clever self will immediately find ways to block it, to control it, to ride it. And then the big surprise that you are in need of, the big experience of losing control and not being annihilated is missed. So as I say, the healing moment is when you really think that this is the end, and it isn't. And so I just don't see at all well, one other thing, what you said reminds me of is Buddhist psychology as opposed to Western psychology. Buddhist psychology would say that working on yourself, improving yourself, is doing violence to yourself. One definition of love is take delight in the other as the other is, in their isness, as they are, no criticism, don't make the other into a project of improvement. That's not love, that's control. So towards oneself, if I love myself, then I take delight in myself as I am, in my isness. So Buddhist psychology says, get to know yourself, get to love yourself, accept yourself, and create an environment that compensates you for who you are. Don't change yourself, change your fucking environment. So it's capitalism that says, don't change the environment, don't be revolutionary, don't make changes so that you feel good as you are and create an environment, human and otherwise, in which you feel good about yourself. That's selfish, that's wah, wah, wah. But change yourself until you can adapt to a shitty environment. Aces. I don't see the point.
That's fascinating. Thank you so much.
Good.
All right, just a quick clarification. Again, I'm not sure if Jeremy was asking the group or you, Andrew, but when you are talking about dosage, can you maybe give some clarification on what you consider small and large dosing for these medicines?
1200 micrograms is large in LSD.
400, sorry?
1200 is large.
1200 is large, okay.
And 200 is small.
Awesome. Hi, Andrew.
Hi.
So I'm just kind of wondering, you know, to me, it kind of seems like you're Galileo saying that, you know, the Earth is in fact revolving around the sun when you're saying these things and kind of challenging the medical model that it seems like in Western culture, at least, is really like revered and people will like fight to the end of time to like protect it. And I'm just kind of curious, like, if your goal for this is to actually like shift kind of like the field of psychotherapy towards this more like patient focused approach, or just kind of like where you see this going in the future.
Well, what do you think? I'm just whistling Dixie. I mean, I don't know. I'm very pleasantly surprised. You know, I was here in Vancouver in 1969, and Hollywood Hospital was still a building, and they were doing LSD therapy, both for so-called alcoholics and so-called creative people. And I actually did some volunteer work there. And then it was shut down. And now there's a parking lot where that hospital was. And for 40 years, it was illegal to use one of these wonderful medicines. Nobody studied them. You know, it's frightening. It's a very, very frightening the state of consciousness that these substances can liberate you into are frightening to the status quo. So it's, but I think psychotherapy per se, it has to be revolutionary. Otherwise, you know, psychiatry has been accused by Deleuze and Guattari, for example. They actually say schizophrenia is a side effect of capitalism. And they make a very good point that in a crazy system, sensitive people go crazy. And only the insensitive ones are what we call sane. And so I don't know, I'm just doing my thing. I'm grateful that in this system, I've been able to have a small scale alternative where I think I'm doing what needs to be done. Whether it will catch on, you know, I try to talk to you guys. Maybe somebody will carry it further. I try to write about it. And you know, they catch me at the U.S. border, and they till I'm 95 years old or something, they try to keep me out because I'm dangerous. So, you know, like, but even those who said that the Earth is going around the sun and not the other way around, eventually, well, it was accepted. I'm hopeful.
I've got one that was asked via chat from Sasan, probably butchering that name. Andrew, what do you say about experiences in which one, while having a powerful LSD trip, encounters entities from other dimensions? Considering that this has been seen by groups of people, you know, it's not just an individual. Yeah, an individual. So it seems like a common theme at high doses of LSD, seeing entities. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Thanks.
Well, as I said before, either it's insight into a world that usually we can't see. You know, it would be hard to drive a car and be aware of those entities at the same time. So we choose to drive a car and not see those entities. That may be the truth. Or, the poisoned human brain comes up with the same kind of mythological figures. There are some common experiences to humankind. For example, any experience in the womb, like from conception to, say, the end of the first year of life, let's say birth plus or minus 9 months. Thousands of years ago, Stone Age babies had the same experience as 21st century babies. And African babies had the same experience as Eskimo babies. So there are universal human experiences, if not elsewhere, in the womb. And that can be projected, these common experiences can come out in certain states of consciousness and projected into the universe. So who knows? That's what I said. I know those experiences exist, and even if many people have it the same way, it may be just a unified dream response in a poisoned brain. And LSD and ayahuasca and these medicines that we are talking about, they may be just deliciously poisoning the brain to produce very similar experiences, because they happen at a deep enough level where we have universally identical experiences.
Excellent, excellent, thank you. Jonathan, you are next.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
So first of all, I'm very inspired by everything you're talking about. This has been incredibly insightful. Thank you. And so I wanted to ask, as someone who is soon going to be entering into the world of becoming a therapist, going through the education and all of that, what kind of advice would you have, knowing that I'll have to go through the system, if you will?
Well, in a nutshell, not to go into too much detail, I think you have to, unfortunately, think in two parallel ways. One is get your credentials, decide where you are going to work, and wherever in different countries, even in different provinces, you have to have different credentials. Get your credentials so that nobody can examine you anymore. The only good thing about examinations, I think, is that eventually no one can examine you. So get there. That gives you power that you can do what you want and not what you don't want. So get your credentials. That's one project. And unfortunately, you have to have another project, which is learn to do your trade. Because they're not going to teach it to you, unfortunately. I don't know any existing school where you are going to get what you need. That you will find in literature. I mean, the classics, there's more psychology in Dostoevsky than you'll ever get in Psych 101. So you have to be an autodidact. You have to conduct your own education, either through apprenticeship. That was my choice. I realized that you can't be a psychotherapist without apprenticing. It's not something that you can learn from a book or learn theoretically, since it's not a theoretical science, since it's not, there are no blueprints. How could you learn it any other way except through apprenticeship? By actually seeing how someone who does it well, how he or she can handle different situations by the seat of his or her pants, and encourages you to begin to do just that. The way Laing pushed me into the deep water was after arriving in London. Almost in the first week, he would just give me a phone call and say, I got an emergency call from such and such an address. Would you mind going there and see what's happening? And then there could be somebody going bananas, somebody riding on top of his mother and playing the Beatles at full volume in the house, while his father is a minister who is trying to exorcise the devil out of his son by digging his huge thumbnails into the son's wrists. And I arrived into that scene and I had to deal with it by the seat of my pants. How else could I deal with it? And then the next day I would go in for supervision and try to tell honestly what I went through and get either encouragement or discouragement or advice or whatever. And slowly one learns to swim in troubled waters. So I think you have to conduct your own education and get your credentials as efficiently as possible, and don't get bogged down by your education not being useful. It's only useful for getting your credentials.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Excellent. Paul, you're up. And I think that's probably going to be it.
Okay, hi. I asked for one more quick question, if you don't mind. I have this analogy I've been using. So a lot of what you've been talking about, to contrast, is more like order and chaos, spontaneity versus intentionality. These are kind of, archaic forces, the primordial, archetypical, whatever. And I agree with you. And the willfulness, to me, that would be the intentionality, that would be the order, that would be trying to control and all that stuff. I agree that completely gets in the way. And what you said in the very beginning is interesting, where you said the radical psychotherapy or the viewpoint will never take over the world. It'll never be popular if so something I've been contemplating is, how can that not be the case? How can we work towards a world where our spontaneous natural self is given priority, which is, I think, what you're saying. It's the mysterious natural self, not the one that we try to clothe in our own understanding. So I have a master analogy that I try to use in a way to try to harmonize these two forces instead of just slaying one to showcase the other. Definitely switch their priority, but not kill the other. So like with defense mechanisms, if you confront defense mechanisms and you try to kill them, they generally just get stronger in many ways. So what I'm trying to do is not attack them, but to undermine them, but also to love them to death and to put them into a support position. I'll just get to my analogy here. And I just want you to destroy this analogy. I'd just be interested in how you destroy this analogy. The analogy of priority would be gardening. Okay, we can learn. So you talk about the efficiency of the doctor who can set your bone. You want them to have knowledge. You want them to set intentionality. You want them to control the outcome. Because that's appropriate there. That can actually do things there. So in gardening, we can't grow the flower. No amount of anything we do will ever grow the flower, but we can tend to the environment and create an environment that the flower wouldn't grow if we didn't intentionally affect the environment. Knowing that every gardener knows that they're not the actual growing of the flower, it has to do itself. So we can learn about how to garden, what fertilizer to use, the amount of sunlight, and what not to do. Maybe that's just as important as what we do. So to me, that's a blending and a depathologizing of mind, a depathologizing of willfulness in a sense. Not to say that we don't want to pathologize it, because it is pathological too. It gives it a place, and it gives it, I think, its proper place in relationship to our natural spontaneity of the mystery of existence that we are. So I'm curious on your take on that analogy as something that can guide our behaviors.
Sure. No, I think you're heading in a direction that I think balance is pro-life. I think anything that's alive is neither maximum nor minimum. It's always optimum. So the question is, what's the optimum relationship between what I would call agency and communion? There was a man at York University, David Bacon, who wrote a book, The Duality of Human Existence, where he basically said every living organism, from a single cell organism to us human beings, their existence has this duality of agency and communion. Agency, say in a single cell, is anything the cell needs to do to propagate itself. There are certain things it has to do to continue in time. That's agency. Anything I do for my own well-being is agency. Anything I do to communicate with others, like I'm trying to do with you, that's communion. Like cells in my body better communicate with each other. Otherwise, a cell that doesn't communicate becomes a cancer cell.
Right.
A cancer cell is agentic, is way over agentic and lost communion. It's not giving over to the organizing principle of my body. So agency and communion is what you're talking about. Now, I definitely think that right now, I think agency is so overweight that I'm emphasizing communion. But once there is more balance, I think there has to be a balance.
Yes.
The other reason I'm emphasizing communion in the healing business, and I don't think agency will ever come into it eventually, because there is a one-upmanship in I am the one who knows. So somebody who knows what kind of music to play for a psychedelic trip, somebody who knows what your intention should be, somebody who knows how to integrate your experience. It's not true. It's a one-upmanship. It's a power game.
It's agentic, yeah.
It's agentic, and it has to go. It doesn't help.
Right.
I think that Jacques Lacan realized quite a while ago that the end of transference, Freud said the end of transference is when the patient realizes that it's not just the therapist who knows, he knows too by now, or she. They both know. Lacan said Freud didn't dare to realize what really the end of transference is. The end of transference is to realize nobody knows anything that is important about what we are talking about. So that when people come into therapy with me, they think they come because I know something they don't. But they're mistaken. I have to know that I don't know every bit as much I don't know as they don't know, that we are both ignorant. We ran out of fathers. It's the child who thinks the other knows. I don't know, but the other knows. So there is always the temptation for people to get into a position of, I know.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is go in as two ignorant people. The guy who took his patient mountain climbing wasn't a master climber. He wasn't teaching climbing. They just said, let's risk it together. And they depended on each other. It was two kids doing it, not the expert and the layman.
So would you say, so you're saying
of the expert?
So so that's moving from paranoia to metanoia, letting experience lead, not knowledge. Would you say that in the dying of knowledge and moving into experience, an authentic experience in that mystery, the metanoia phase, it seems it's still, and I'm speaking more from like the balance. I love how you said the coming into balance. In the metanoia phase, there are statements or knowledge that comes up that's now conforming to experience instead of trying to manipulate experience. And it is knowledge. You could say like, I realized I was neglected or whatever. And it's something that becomes, it's simple, it's unjustified. It doesn't try to it's not neurotic, but it's still a knowledge in the sense that it's conceptual. Now, would you say, to me, that would be knowledge that has conformed to reality instead of trying to conform reality to knowledge? And just on for the sake of balance, would you say that that knowledge is okay, as long as we don't stick to it and become obsessed with it? If we can let it rise and fall as is appropriate with reality.
Well, to realize who did what to whom is a great discovery.
Yeah, and so that would be the metanoia, I think, is that, or that's one aspect of it.
But you know, I would never, for example, I would never put, one of the questions that often comes up is somebody says, especially insurance companies, would ask a psychiatrist, is X, Mr. X, genuinely can't do those things or just won't do them? You know, the can't and the won't. Like, I will never be in a position, I would never put myself in a position to get paid for knowing whether you can't or won't.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't think the truth, there is ever any truth that's not associated with some misuse of power. So whatever we come to will be between us. And we may both be deluded. I don't know. I only believe what I believe until, but by the way, I don't think that one has to work hard for metanoia. I think it's all through relaxation. And when I say relaxation, that's another word for stop willing. Whatever there is to know, I think the Buddha got enlightened under the Bodhi tree because he relaxed, because he stopped willing. He just marveled at what his mind is doing. He became a fascinated spectator. You know, like there is an itch on your leg and you say, I don't have to scratch it. It comes, it goes. I don't have to do anything. Like you look through with this eye that I'm kind of opening, hopefully, and you'll realize that any wisdom that there is always in the direction of relaxation, not in the direction of hard effort and hard work. When the Buddha was dying, what he said was to his disciples who were bemoaning his death, he says, what are you yammering about? Everything I have ever said, I found within. Be a lamp unto yourself and just relax and realize that we are all Buddhas. You know, like we are all Christ, we are all Buddhas, not through effort. In the Middle Ages, they talked about imitatio Christi, that you have to imitate Christ and then, no, you just fucking have to relax.
That sounds horrible, imitating Christ. Yeah, we are, okay. Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
All right, if you all can hear me out there, that's gonna wrap things up for Q&A. Thank you so much everyone for your awesome questions. It's gonna take, for the next kind of section, we're gonna get into our group chat. So if you're not interested in taking part of the breakouts, you can sign off now after Christoph kind of closes things out. But we usually will take a 2-minute break and then pop back and then go for a group discussion as long as you'd like. But Christoph, before we leave, you got a few final things to say?
I'll say goodbye now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Andrew, I really wanted to thank you for coming on and having this, honestly, what is a conversation and dialogue with us, because this went really deep and it was, I found, very captivating, and everyone kind of kept back and forth and we just really went deep. So I really appreciate you coming on for this and doing this. We will also make this recording available. So Andrew, I'll share that with you as well. And we're going to have a website up soon where we'll actually have this more available. For people who are interested, we do have a group chat where we also keep these kind of conversations going with everything to do with psychedelics and all these sort of topics that some of the things that we discussed today. So if you're interested in joining into this chat, please send me a message on the meetup.com app. And from there, I can get you in. Just make sure you have the Telegram app downloaded. So I'll get the steps in so people can come in there. Also, just wanted to say, I don't know, Andrew, if there's any sort of places people can follow you, or if they have more questions or any of your books or anything that they want to follow up on, if we can maybe get that. You're welcome to type that into the chat, or we can sort of share that as well in the group chat.
You can find me on the internet,
Easily find you on the internet, definitely. With that being said, yeah, I want to just thank all of you guys for coming here and for being part of this. And thank you, Kenny, for helping us with this moderation and doing all that. And that being said, we're going to just take a little intermission. And again, for the last we went a bit over time, but we'll into the last 10 minutes. If you guys want to stick around for that, I think it would be a lot of fun. And those people who want to stay a little longer, possibly can. If not, then that's amazing. And I'm so thankful that you guys were all here and part of this.